Amina knelt beside the quiet river, her hands deep in the cool water as she scrubbed clothes against a flat stone. The morning sun was slowly rising over the hills of Makutano village, painting the sky with soft orange light. Birds chirped from nearby trees, while women gathered along the riverbank doing their daily chores. But the voices around her were not kind. "Look at her," Wanjiku said loudly while wringing water from a piece of cloth. "The most beautiful woman in Makutano, yet she has no child." Several women laughed. Nyambura shook her head dramatically. 5 years of marriage and still nothing. What kind of blessing is that? The laughter grew louder. Amina kept her head lowered. Her hands continued moving in the water, scrubbing the clothes again and again. She pretended not to hear them, but their words entered her heart like sharp thorns. This was not the first time. Almost every morning at the river, the same voices followed her. Sometimes the women whispered. Sometimes they spoke loudly so she could hear every word. "She walks proudly as if she is important," one woman muttered. "But her house is empty," another replied. Amina blinked quickly to stop tears from falling. She refused to cry in front of them. Instead, she focused on finishing her work. When the clothes were clean, she folded them carefully and placed them in the basket. She lifted the basket onto her head and began walking back toward the village without speaking to anyone. The narrow path passed through fields of maize and beans. Farmers were already working under the warm sunlight. Some greeted her politely. Others looked at her with quiet curiosity. Everyone in Makutano knew the story. Amina had been married for 5 years, yet she had never given birth. When she reached the compound where she lived, Kamau was sitting outside carving a wooden stool. Small pieces of wood lay scattered on the ground around him. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "You are back early today," he said warmly. Amina lowered the basket and sat beside him. Kamau studied her face carefully. "Did they trouble you again?" he asked softly. She nodded slowly. "They laughed," she whispered. Kamau sighed deeply and put the carving knife aside. "My wife," he said gently. "People will always talk, but their words cannot decide our life." He took her hands in his. "You are enough for me." Amina tried to smile, but sadness still weighed on her heart. Just then, Mama Kamau stepped outside carrying a cooking pot. Her sharp eyes immediately noticed the two of them sitting quietly. "So you are resting already?" she said with a serious tone. Amina quickly stood up. "I have finished washing the clothes," she replied respectfully. Mama Kamau placed the pot on the ground and folded her arms. 5 years, she said slowly. 5 years in this marriage and still no grandchild. Kamau shifted uncomfortably. "Mother," but she interrupted him. "I am speaking the truth," she continued firmly. "Every woman in this village brings children into her home. Why is my son different?" Amina lowered her eyes to the ground. "I have prayed," she said quietly. Mama Kamau shook her head. "Prayer alone is not enough," she replied. "A home without children is like a farm without crops." Those words struck Amina deeply. Kamau stood up quickly. "That is enough," he said firmly. "Amina is my wife and she deserves respect." Mama Kamau stared at him with surprise. "You defend her now," she replied coldly. "But one day you will understand my concern." She turned and walked back inside the house. Silence filled the compound. Amina felt tears forming in her eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. Kamau gently lifted her chin. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said. But the pain remained. Later that afternoon, Amina quietly left the compound. She needed space to breathe and clear her thoughts. She walked past the last houses of Makutano village and followed a path leading toward the forest. The forest was old and thick. Large trees covered the sky with their branches. Many villagers avoided entering it because they believed spirits lived there. But Amina kept walking. Her heart was heavy, and she wanted somewhere quiet to cry. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. The sounds of the village disappeared behind her. Eventually, she reached a clearing where a giant tree stood alone in the center. The tree was enormous. Its trunk was thick and twisted, and its branches stretched high into the sky like giant arms. Many villagers called it the sacred tree. Amina slowly approached it. Then she knelt on the ground. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I have carried this pain for many years," she whispered. "Please hear me." The wind moved softly through the leaves. "I only want one blessing," she continued. "Just one child." Her voice trembled as she spoke. For a moment, the forest remained completely silent. Then a soft voice spoke behind her. "Amina." She gasped and quickly turned around. An elderly woman stood nearby. Her silver hair shone softly in the fading sunlight. She wore simple white clothing, and her eyes were calm but full of wisdom. Amina wiped her tears quickly. "Who are you?" she asked. The old woman stepped closer. "I have watched you for some time," she said gently. "Why do you cry before this tree?" Amina hesitated for a moment, but then explained everything. She spoke about the gossip from the villagers. She spoke about the harsh words from her mother-in-law. She spoke about the deep desire in her heart to hold a child of her own. The old woman listened quietly. When Amina finished speaking, the woman nodded slowly. "Your pain is real," she said softly, "but a person's worth is not measured only by children." Amina looked down. "In my village, it feels that way," she replied. The old woman was silent for a moment. Then she pointed toward a narrow path between the trees. "If your heart truly desires a child," she said, "there may be a way." Hope suddenly filled Amina's chest. "What must I do?" she asked quickly. The old woman pointed deeper into the forest. "Follow that path," she said. "At the end, you will find a tree whose leaves shine like stars." Amina listened carefully. "Bring back one leaf," the woman continued. "Only one." Without hesitation, Amina stood up and began walking along the path. The forest grew darker as she moved deeper inside. Branches rustled above her. Owls called in the distance. But she continued walking. After a long time, she reached another clearing. In the center stood a magnificent tree glowing softly beneath the evening sky. Its leaves shimmered like silver stars. Amina stared in amazement. Slowly, she reached up and plucked one shining leaf from a branch. The moment she touched it, warmth spread through her hand. Holding the glowing leaf carefully, she turned and hurried back along the path. When she returned to the sacred tree, the old woman was waiting. "You have done well," the woman said with a gentle smile. She looked at the glowing leaf in Amina's hands. "Plant this leaf in your garden," she instructed. Amina listened carefully. "Care for it every day with patience," the old woman continued. Amina nodded. "But remember," the woman added seriously, "every gift from the spirits carries responsibility." Before Amina could ask what she meant, the old woman slowly stepped backward. Within seconds, she disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Amina stood alone again. She held the glowing leaf tightly and hurried back toward Makutano village. The next morning, she planted the leaf carefully in the soil behind her house. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, something unusual began to grow from the soil. A strange plant twisted upward, its branches curling in shapes she had never seen before. Its leaves shimmered softly in the sunlight. Soon the villagers noticed it. "What kind of plant is that?" someone asked. Another woman whispered nervously. "It looks strange." Some people began to gossip again. "Maybe she has turned to witchcraft." Even Mama Kamal became suspicious. "What nonsense are you growing in this compound?" she demanded one afternoon. But Amina said nothing. She simply continued watering the plant every morning and evening. Then one day something incredible happened. The plant suddenly glowed with golden light. From its branches appeared a shining fruit shaped like a small gourd. That night, Amina had a dream. The old woman appeared again. "This fruit contains the essence of life," she explained gently. "If you wish to become a mother, eat it at sunrise." Amina listened carefully. "But your child will not be ordinary," the woman continued. "He will belong partly to this world and partly to the spirit world." Amina's heart beat faster. "You must raise him with wisdom and courage," the old woman said. Then the dream faded. Amina woke up before sunrise. The golden fruit was glowing softly in the garden. Her hands trembled as she picked it. She took a deep breath. Then slowly, she ate it. Warmth spread through her body. Something inside her had changed. And weeks later, she realized the miracle had begun. She was pregnant. Baraka's cry filled the small house just before sunrise. The sound was strong and clear, echoing through the quiet compound. Outside, The sky was turning from dark blue to soft orange as the first light of morning touched the hills of Makutano village. Inside the house, Amina held the newborn child close to her chest. Her face was tired, but her eyes shone with joy and relief. Kamau stood beside her, staring at the tiny baby in amazement. "Our son," he whispered. The midwife smiled as she wrapped the child in a clean cloth. "He is healthy and strong," she said. "The spirits have finally blessed this home." Kamau carefully lifted the baby into his arms. The little boy opened his eyes slowly and looked around as if he was already curious about the world. "We will name him Baraka," Kamau said proudly, "because he is truly a blessing." Outside the house, news had already begun spreading across the village. Amina has given birth. Women who once mocked her now gathered near the compound whispering in disbelief. Wanjiku folded her arms. After all these years? Nyambura shook her head slowly. Maybe the ancestors finally remembered her. But inside the house, Amina felt none of their old voices anymore. The moment she held Baraka in her arms, the pain of the past years seemed to fade away. For the first time in many years, her heart felt completely full. Mama Kamau entered the room slowly. Her face was serious at first, but when she saw the baby, her expression softened. "A grandson," she said quietly. She sat beside Amina and looked closely at the child. "He looks strong," she added. It was the first kind thing she had said to Amina in a long time. Days passed peacefully in the compound. Villagers came to see the child and congratulate the family. Some brought small gifts like milk, fruits, and handmade blankets. Baraka grew quickly, but from the very beginning, Amina noticed something unusual about him. Unlike other babies, Baraka rarely cried. Instead, he spent long moments quietly staring at empty spaces in the air. Sometimes he smiled softly, as if he could see something others could not. At night, he slept peacefully without disturbance. One afternoon, when Baraka was only a few months old, Amina placed him on a mat outside the house while she prepared food. Suddenly, she heard soft laughter. She turned around and saw Baraka smiling widely while looking toward a nearby tree. But no one was there. A strange feeling passed through her heart. She remembered the dream of the old woman and the warning about the child not being ordinary. As Baraka grew older, more strange things began to happen. When he started crawling, birds often landed near him without fear. Goats and chickens gathered around him quietly, as if they felt safe in his presence. One day, when Baraka was about 3 years old, a strong wind began blowing across the village. Dust filled the air, and people hurried to protect their homes. Baraka was sitting outside playing with small stones. Suddenly, he laughed and clapped his hands. Almost immediately, the wind stopped. The villagers looked at the sky in confusion. Some people began whispering quietly. "That child is different." Amina heard those whispers and felt both pride and worry. She remembered the words spoken by the mysterious old woman in the forest. "Your child will not be ordinary." When Baraka turned 5 years old, Amina decided to return to the sacred tree. Early one morning, she held Baraka's hand and walked with him toward the forest. The boy walked calmly beside her, looking curiously at the tall trees around them. "Mother, where are we going?" he asked. "To meet someone important," she replied. They walked for a long time until they reached the clearing where the giant sacred tree stood. The same quiet feeling filled the air. Baraka looked up at the enormous branches stretching high above them. "This place feels alive," he said softly. Amina felt a chill when she heard those words. Before she could answer, a familiar voice spoke. "You have returned." Amina turned quickly. The elderly woman stood near the tree exactly as she had years ago. Her silver hair still shone softly in the sunlight. Baraka looked at her without fear. "Who are you?" he asked. The old woman smiled gently. "I am someone who helped bring you into this world." Amina bowed her head respectfully. "I have come for guidance," she said. The old woman studied the boy carefully. "Yes," she said quietly, "the gift has grown strong." Baraka walked closer to the tree and touched its rough bark. "It speaks," he said softly. Amina's heart began beating faster. "What do you mean?" she asked. Baraka looked back at her calmly. "It says I belong here." The old woman nodded slowly. "This child was born through the magic of this forest," she explained, "but his future will not be forced." Amina listened carefully. One day the spirits will call him, the woman continued, but the choice will always be his. Amina felt both pride and fear. She held Baraka tightly as they left the forest that day. Years passed quickly. Baraka grew into a calm and gentle young man. He was respectful, wise, and kind to everyone in Makutano village. If someone was sick, he often sat beside them quietly. Many times their pain seemed to ease after he visited. When animals were injured, they often came near him without fear. The villagers began respecting him deeply. Some people even traveled from nearby villages hoping he could help them. But Baraka never acted proudly. He still helped his father in the fields and carried water for his mother like any ordinary young man. When he turned 18, he came to sit beside Amina one evening as the sun was setting behind the hills. The sky was glowing with deep orange light. "Mother," he said softly. Amina looked at him. "Yes, my son?" Baraka took a slow breath. "The spirits have been calling me in my dreams." Amina's heart tightened. She had always known this moment would come. "They asked me to return to the sacred tree," he continued. Tears filled her eyes. "Must you go?" she asked quietly. Baraka nodded gently. "It is my path." The next evening, the villagers gathered to say goodbye. Everyone in Makutano had heard the stories about Baraka and the mysterious powers surrounding him. Even the women who once mocked Amina stood quietly in the crowd. Baraka hugged his father first. Kamau placed both hands on his shoulders proudly. "You have made this family strong," he said. Then Baraka turned to his mother. Amina held his hands tightly. "I prayed for a child," she whispered, "but the spirits gave me someone greater than I imagined." Baraka smiled softly. "Your faith brought me here," he replied. Then he slowly turned toward the forest. The villagers watched in silence as he walked along the path leading to the sacred tree. The forest slowly swallowed his figure as darkness fell. Amina stood there long after he disappeared. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her heart felt peaceful. The same villagers who once laughed at her now spoke her name with respect. And in Makutano village, the story of Amina and her son Baraka became a story told for generations.